And our program guest this morning is the Acting Foreign Minister and Trade Minister Craig Emerson. But before then, we'll take a look at the papers. And Dennis Atkins in the looking at the more spectacular Bob Carr story. Maybe we missed one surrounding Joel Fitzgibbon, former Defence Minister, served his time, probably due to return to the ministry.
Yeah, former Defence Minister who has always felt aggrieved by the fact he was forced out of the Defence Ministry, never thought he did anything wrong. He thought he made a small mistake letting his brother do some work out of his ministerial office, which I think was a mistake. And as soon as the Stephen Smith for Foreign Minister story became, got some currency, the vacancy in Defence, I think Joel Fitzgibbon thought, that's where I'd like to go. Apparently he was told that where he would go if he was going to come back into the executive would be a parliamentary secretary position. At the moment he's the Chief Government Whip. That's one of the most prestigious positions sort of outside the cabinet almost. You get to dole out patronage to your colleagues. It is a very, very prestigious, powerful position. There's no way he'd take a parliamentary secretary job.
But I think Julie Gillard, that's what she offered him when she called him on Thursday night. And I think what we can take from the reports this morning and what he's apparently been saying around Canberra is that he's kind of aggrieved that he's not in the ministry. I think whether he got... Once Bob Carr was getting the cabinet spot, then I think it wasn't possible for the Prime Minister to make good on the expectations of all the people who had them. But it would seem quite dangerous to have an aggrieved Chief Government Whip, because even though it's a powerful position, it's not necessarily a household name position, but it's the person who has the Prime Minister's back in caucus. And so I think it's not good for Julie Gillard if she's got an aggrieved Chief Government Whip.
No, well, that's certainly not good. The other thing that's not good is the fact that these people keep talking about these things.
Absolutely.
Well, there's a report there that suggested that he considered resigning. As I understand it, he considered resigning as Chief Government Whip, but not from the Parliament. But nevertheless, I mean, it shows you how stiff Kevin Rudd is, that at the moment that the ballot is over, Gillard supporters start fighting among themselves. He could have done with a bit of that in the lead up to the vote. But Lenore, Marco Bibb and Kevin Rudd, it appears, have buried the hatchet.
Well, yeah, there's a feature article about Marco Bibb and his decision to leave Parliament, and it says that on Thursday he had a cup of tea with Kevin Rudd. Obviously he was quite... had played a big role in the coup against Kevin Rudd in 2010. Part of his reason for leaving is that he's never sort of overcome the faceless man tag that's been sort of dogging him ever since then. The pair have apparently buried the hatchet. The
Over an ice vovo?
It doesn't actually give us the ice vovo detail. It does, however, scotch a whole bunch of the rumours that have been around about what he's going to do. Now, the most plausible, I think, quote in the whole thing is from Graham Richardson, who says that, in fact, Marco Bibb's leaving Parliament because he got sick of being covered in blood.
OK, and Misha, we'll talk about your interview with Bob Carr in a moment, but let's have a look at something that he had to say yesterday.
It's very, very unhealthy for you to go back. It's very unhealthy for you to go back and look at things I said previously. I've been around for a long time, I've said a lot of things, and you'll only get confused with contradictions.
That is a brilliant
Unhelpful for whom?
No point going back, looking at what he said in the past.
Well, Barry, I think the take-out message from this is that anyone who fears that perhaps their flamboyant rhetoric of the past might cruel their political ambitions once and for all should take heart from Bob Carr's twist and pivot here. And essentially what he's saying is, yes, there's lots of material back there in that Thought Lines blog, and there's some really interesting views about the world and how it works and what Australia's role in it should be that are at odds with the current stated government policy. Well, amongst the spicier elements, he was most concerned about Australia's positioning very tightly with America when President Obama came to Australia last year and announced the sort of troop presence in Darwin and the more aggressive kind of footing against the sort of rise of more highly armed China. And so he says on that we shouldn't be feeding American chronic insecurities. That's not smart. He says he knows China's insecurities are worse. He says that as for American military on foreign soil, we shouldn't become kind of merely an Okinawa and have a permanent presence here. We're not an aircraft carrier. Amongst the other spicy things, he's at one point called the Arab world politically retarded with not a working democracy in sight. Mitt Romney is bloodless. George W. Bush, the former president, is profoundly simple and sounded like a dumb idiot. And
so this is why he's saying he's going to moderate some of his views.
Indeed. So what Bob Carr says about this is he says, look, I held those views as a freewheeling private citizen. They should be set aside now for his more precise views that he'll now form platform as Foreign Minister. And we all have private views, but when you're the Foreign Minister, you have one view, and that's the official government view, and he'll now be forming that in consultation with professional diplomats and his own judgments.
And Dennis, Clive Palmer is getting an unexpected award today, apparently.
Well, it is unexpected, and I find it quite extraordinary. At the end of a week in which Clive Palmer, the billionaire mining magnate from the Gold Coast, has trashed a major football code in Australia, reduced the A-League to a sort of shambles, he gets named as a national treasure. I don't know what the qualifications are you need to become a national treasure, but if he can get one, I think we're all in line.
Keep in mind, this is in the same week that Wayne Swan wrote the piece in the Monthly where he had a go at some of the rich people in the community. He said they're undermining good public policy by spending their money in the way that they do.
He'd presumably not agree, since he thought Clive Palmer, Gina Reinhardt, Twiggy Forrest were all using their money to push their vested interests against the national interest in a way that was poisoning our democracy. So presumably he doesn't think he's a national treasure.
What do you make of Wayne Swan's contribution in the Monthly?
Well, I mean, Wayne Swan has been criticised a lot over, recent years for not being a very effective communicator, but he sure has been communicating effectively recently. He was very effective in his communication about what he thought about Kevin Rudd, and he's been very effectively communicating in the Monthly about what he thinks about some of these billionaires who made the government's life difficult in terms of the mining tax and the carbon tax.
Well,
I think
if the test of being a good communicator was the message received, yes, I think it was. What do you think, Dennis?
Well, I mean, Wayne Swan has suffered, as Lenore said, from a bad image. And it's almost as if everyone's looking over there and all of a sudden Wayne Swan pops up over there and says, here I am. Also, I don't think you can underestimate the impact this has on the Labor base. They love this stuff. And after what the Labor Party's been through, this is sort of, something, charge up the hill, fellas. So I think there is a bit of that behind what Swan's doing.
It's a base motivator, but there's also some quite thoughtful things that he has to say there, which other commentators outside of the partisan fray have been trying to blow the whistle on a bit in recent years as well, and that is the level to which, the power with which some of these interests are able to now try and scuttle public policy debates, whereas once their voices would have been one component of the broader debate.
And I think what's really irked Swan and people in the Labor Party is that they're not just advancing their views as their views and the things that are in their business interests, they're advancing their views as being in the public interest. So they're competing with the government but using a lot of money and airtime and advertising with a contrary narrative about what's in the public interest and what's in the national interest.
And usually their advertising is more effective.
Yeah, and also,
they do it better,
I think anyone who read Wayne Swan's book, Postcodes, which was written a few years ago, wouldn't be at all surprised by a word that's in the Monthly essay.
OK, well, that's the papers. Craig Emerson in a moment. But last week we referred to Bruce Hawker as a lobbyist. Now, we wish to clarify that he's no longer associated with Hawker Britain, having sold his interests some time ago. So he's not now a lobbyist, nor was he a lobbyist at the time that he worked with Kevin Rudd. It's probably more accurate to describe him as a strategist or an advisor. And we also presented an image from an online story concerning Mr Hawker, but we don't associate ourselves with the statements made in that story. OK, we're joined now from Canberra by the Acting Foreign Minister and Trade Minister, Craig Emerson.